evening. Again, I'm Tanja Poffenholz. I'm the director of the Inclusive Peace and Transition Initiative here at the Graduate Institute. And I welcome you on behalf of the Institute. And I'm very happy that we do this joint event together with the Colombian Mission here in Geneva. And welcome also the ambassador from Bern, the Colombian ambassador. And we have also here the Colombian ambassador here in Geneva. She's on her way back from Colombia. She was really very eager to be with us, but she was called to be present at the signing ceremony yesterday for the peace deal. And we have here from the Colombian mission, we have Mr. Assad José Peña. He's here and will give you some welcome words as well. He's a Minister for Plenipotentiary at the permanent mission here. And just to say from our end, we have planned this event kind of last minute together with the mission because we thought it's a really important moment in time for Colombia, because what we know and what we do here a lot at the initiative is providing comparative expertise and evidence and support peace processes in providing research expertise on other cases and show like what can go wrong and what can go good. And often it's also good to really look at this comparative cases and see what can we learn from a given case. And that's what we actually want to do today, to see and take the cases of Northern Ireland and Cyprus and see what Colombia can learn from these cases. Because what we know is from peace deals, the signing of a peace deal is just the beginning. And there's a long way to go, and there's a lot of challenges upcoming. And the biggest challenge, of course, is now the ratification and the plebiscite. So we want to really discuss what does it mean, the consequences, if there is a yes vote, because then even then, if there's a yes vote, it's just the beginning of a long road of implementation. And what does it mean? What are the challenges? If there's a no vote, what does it mean? To learn from these experiences to see what are the consequences of a no vote for a peace process in a country. So this is what we want to provide you here with, some comparative discussions on this. And of course, we have this discussion on the panel, and then we will have plenty of time to discuss with you in the audience and your questions, what your questions are for this. I would like to now welcome our colleague from the Colombian mission to give his welcome words. Thank you very much.
And on behalf of Ambassador Beatriz Londoño Soto, I would like to thank the Inclusive Peace and Transition Initiative and the Graduate Institute of Geneva for hosting this public event on the potential consequences of a yes or no vote in the plebiscite in Colombia. Also, our gratitude goes to Dr. Tanja Poffenholz, Director of the IPTI, for her interest, disposal, and support in putting together this event, as well as to the three distinguished panelists who have graciously agreed to participate in tonight's discussion. I'm particularly pleased to welcome Dr. Rodrigo Primi, one of the most prominent constitutional lawyers in Colombia, as well as Ms. Kate Ferron and Professor Ahmed Sosen. I should underline that the views and perspectives expressed in their personal and independent capacity are intended to inform and enhance the collective understanding of the multidimensional problem of peace building. As you probably know, yesterday in Cartagena de Indias, with the presence of several heads of state, ministers of foreign affairs, and other distinguished dignitaries, the Government of Colombia and FARC formally signed the final agreement for ending the conflict and building a stable and long-lasting peace in Colombia. Ambassador Londoño is not here today, as she traveled to Cartagena for this historical event, and it was mentioned here before. Let me quote President Santos' remark at the ceremony yesterday in Cartagena, when he said that what we signed today, after years of serious, discreet, and difficult negotiations, goes beyond an agreement between a government and a guerrilla to end an armed conflict. What we signed is a statement delivered by the Colombian people to the world that we are tired of war, that we do not accept violence as a means to defend ideas, and that we say loud and clear, no more wars. His statement represents well how important it is for Colombians the signature of this agreement, as it seeks to put an end to a confrontation that lasted for longer than half a century and took away hundreds of thousands of lives and left thousands more displaced. The comprehensive nature of this agreement seeks to leave violence behind, combat drug trafficking, guarantee the rights of victims to truth, justice and reparation, expand democracy, promote rural development, strengthen state presence in the territories, and stimulate greater participation of communities. This Sunday, October the 2nd, Colombians will have an opportunity to participate in the plebiscite that formulates the following question. Do you support the final agreement for ending the conflict and building a stable and long-lasting peace? The rules for this plebiscite are contained in the Law 1806, in which the Colombian Congress established thresholds rulings to these participation mechanisms. As a minimum, it provides that the affirmative vote should be higher than 13% of the electoral census. This 13% is equivalent to nearly 5 million voters. By establishing the threshold for approval, the mechanism promotes citizens' participation, and those in favor or against should actually go to the polls to express their position in the consultation, which means that abstentions will not play a defining role. Of course, many questions will arise and have arisen, both before the vote and after the vote. I hope that the discussion to be held here today will shed some light from different perspectives on those many questions. Let me finish by quoting again President Santos when he remarks, "There is a word less in the world, and that is the Colombian one." I thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much. And I think what we know from all these different places in the world at the moment, I mean, if you look into Syria, if you look into Ukraine, if you look at popular conflicts, Colombia is really our hope case. So we really want the process. I mean, it's not just that Colombians, of course, are eager for peace, but it's really the world is looking at Colombia, because this is one of the really few conflicts at the moment where we have a lot of hope that things are going really well. And I think Colombians deserve all the support we can give you as international community, and also from our research what we can contribute. And I think the first thing, if you think about the plebiscite, is that how can anybody not vote yes for a peace agreement? It's even like, a lot of people think like, why is it even a question? And I think it is a question if you look into different plebiscites in the world, because, of course, people say, I'm for peace. You will hardly find in a conflict country anybody that is against peace. But it's often people say, not this peace, not like it was negotiated, not like this, not like that. So there's always grievances, and there's always also good arguments that you can say, I don't like this aspect or that aspect. So I think the idea also here was to show a little bit what are the different obstacles that we have with plebiscites, and what we have seen in other countries, and what does it mean if you sort of give justice to this argument or that argument. So this was really as a means to bring a little bit more, I would say, an evidence-based perspective, because what happens very often in plebiscite, it's like elections, it's a campaign. So it's a very politicized discussion, and often not so much about really what is in for the peace process, but it's often very politicized. So what we wanted to do is a little bit not have a political debate, but really have a debate on what it means, a very sort of evidence-based oriented discussion, what has happened, if it's yes and no, and what does it mean in general from the experiences we know, and then see also what does that mean for Colombia. So that's really the idea. I would like to now introduce our speakers. So I have here Kate Ferson from Northern Ireland. She was a founding member of the Northern Irish Women Coalition, which is a very interesting, actually, I would say, can even say organization, construction, I don't know even what to say, because this was really a coalition of women who have decided that they wanted to participate in a peace process and made it as a political party to the table. So I think that's also a very interesting case of how people have pressured themselves into the negotiations and really took up a very important role in this process and have influenced the peace negotiations a lot. And she's at the moment working as an advisor for the European Union in security sector reform. So also being there to also share experiences a lot on the case in Northern Ireland, and she will inform us how it was, the build-up of the towards the referendum after the peace agreement, and what were the consequences of, in this case, a yes vote. And our other panelist is Professor Ahmet Susan. He is from Cyprus, and he was a member also of the official Turkish Cypriotic negotiation team during the UN-led peace process, which then finally led to the no vote so that the peace deal at that time could not be implemented in a referendum. So we have a positive and we have a negative case, so to say, and would like to compare that. And then I have here Professor Rodrigo Primni. He was already mentioned as a very famous Colombian constitutional lawyer. He works on constitutional law, human rights, and is at the Universidad Nacional in Bogota, and happened to be here because he also does other work at the moment at the UN here. And this was a good occasion for us to get him and also have his opinion, not sort of as somebody who's of course involved and is very clearly, I think, for a yes vote, and I think there's no way to hide this, but to tell us what he makes out of the experiences that we will hear from Northern Ireland and Cyprus, and how he sees that, what that means for Colombia. So I would like to start with you, Kate, and the mic, and really tell us how did it come that there was basically, you ended up in Northern Ireland with a yes vote, but also what were the different sort of positions that people sort of, that you had a strong no campaign and a yes campaign, and explain us a little bit how this came into being.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation to be here this evening. I'd like to start just to say a little bit about the conflict in Northern Ireland to set some context. It's only a 500-year conflict, so that won't take long. And then to say something about the nature of the Good Friday Agreement, which is the name of our agreement. Then to speak a little bit about the referendum campaign, to explain how we campaigned, and maybe to share with you some of my personal experiences as a person who addressed meetings just like this, but in very real terms, just before our referendum in 1998. And then finally, as Tanya requested, to offer some reflections on what comes after the referendum. And now we have almost 20 years in fact we have 20 years this year to look back on and to reflect a little bit more deeply. So the current iteration of the conflict really was a 30-year-long ethno-religious conflict that had resulted at the end of the day in a mutually hurting stalemate. Nobody was going to win this war by military means, and there was an increasing realization that that was the case. The British government, the political and military actors in Northern Ireland were not going to win. The IRA and the loyalist paramilitary groupings on the other side, who were perpetrating the war on the non-government side, were not going to win either. So there was this realization that nobody was going to win, so what were we going to do? What would the alternative be? And in the context of two ceasefires, one held by the IRA and one by loyalist paramilitary, so it's called the Combined Loyalist Military Command. So IRA slips off the tongue more easily than CLMC. But so these were the two main paramilitary groupings, and those groupings were prescribed by the British government and also by the Irish government as being terrorist organisations throughout the whole time of the conflict. But in the context of an IRS ceasefire and then a loyalist ceasefire in 1994, and also engagements between elites, discussions behind the scenes, discussions between the British government and representatives, proxy and then actual representatives of the IRA, contacts which were denied while they were happening for legitimate reasons, in my view, but happening all the same. We got to a stage where in 1996, the governments decided to have an inclusive process to determine who would be around the negotiating table, and they held elections for that purpose. Every time that we tried to come to a resolution of our conflict previously, it was only what were termed the constitutional political parties, which was a pseudonym really for the legitimate political parties, i.e. not people who were associated with terrorism. So that was the reason why, for example, Sinn Féin would not have been allowed to participate, but the governments decided then in this context of the ceasefires to have elections for the negotiations, and that was Tanya spoke, it's not the focus of this discussion, but spoke about the Northern Ireland Women's Coalition, and that was our opportunity also. So we ended up with 10 political parties, four or five parties who had existed for a long time, 2 very new parties, one of which I belong to and helped to found, and then 3 parties who were previously terrorist groups as seen by the UK government, and at least 3 of the other political parties in the table. So I hope you get the sense it was a kind of a complicated mix. There wasn't a lot of trust between these people. They had been literally fighting each other for years. And the course of our negotiations lasted for 2 years. They were chaired by US Senator George Mitchell. So the United States were very firmly in the lead there. Both the British and Irish governments were supporting. And at various times throughout the negotiations, the ceasefires broke down because of the pressures of being involved in talks and the fear from certain constituencies that people would, that their political leaders or their representatives of terrorist groups, paramilitary organizations, would in fact sell out the principles, that they would agree to something which fell short of the expectations. Sorry, I'm being asked to slow down. Okay. So after 2 years of negotiation, we ended up with the Good Friday Agreement, which did... The mic down? Sorry. I thought it was the speed. Okay. The Good Friday Agreement did agree the constitutional arrangements for Northern Ireland. And again, this was a proxy for... This was distributing the power. This was the parliamentary, the people, the executive, kind of a mini assembly, a mini parliament in Northern Ireland. The relationship between Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, and the relationship between the Northern Ireland and the UK. But one of the themes that we put onto the table was not just looking after those constitutional issues, but also looking after the issues of rights, of reconciliation, of dealing with the past. In particular, we looked at the right of women to full and equal participation, because that had been a real issue for us. The right to equal opportunity in social and economic activity, irrespective of class, creed, disability, gender, or ethnicity. We got commitments in the agreement for the UK government to produce public policy that would promote social exclusion, including community development and participation for women. We sought the incorporation of the European Convention on Human Rights into Northern Ireland's polity. We got the establishment of a Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission and a Bill of Rights for Northern Ireland that was to reflect our particular circumstances, and an obligation on public authorities to promote equality. Okay, so The provisions to address reconciliation and the dealing with the past were not advocated by many of the parties, but at during the referendum campaign, they really came to the fore. The agreement was signed by political parties on the 10th of April in 1998, and then 42 days later, we went to a referendum on it. So it was a very short election campaign. On the yes side, we had 8 parties, both nationalist parties, some unionist parties. But on the no side, we had 2 big parties voting against. And there were also, you could see fragmentation of the paramilitary organizations, and there were different fringe groupings who didn't want to participate, who didn't want to vote for it. And as Thani said earlier, people said, I'm not voting for that piece, that's not the piece that I want, and that I want certainly at this time. So each yes party had its own campaign, but we also linked, we had an umbrella yes campaign that we linked with, and the slogans there were very simple. We basically presented, it's staying with the past, staying with what the status quo was basically a dead-end street. It wasn't going to take us anywhere. But moving forward was a one-way street. This would bring us forward, this would bring us economic prosperity, it would bring us peace, it would bring us stability, it would bring us time and space to reflect and to get over the conflict. In terms of the actual campaign, the bigger parties they campaigned themselves, then they campaigned a little bit with the smaller parties. They did things together, and campaigning together was a really powerful thing, even though politicians weren't always comfortable with it. And one image that sticks out in my mind is that of Bono with John Hume and David Trimble, and Bono looked the most comfortable in that particular daguerreotype. But all of those, so getting allies wherever we could get them. They were pop stars. We didn't have social media to the same extent that it was now. We had old-fashioned newspapers, ads in newspapers, letters to newspapers. Town hall meetings like this one. What we also did was, our agreement was political language and very nuanced. And one of the things that we did in the Yes campaign was to take that and to translate it from political English into simple, plain, on the street English, to demonstrate to people, what things actually meant. And that was something that we did around community groups, community development, and the community and voluntary sector. Some of the issues that came up in the campaign were the fact that you were allowing terrorists into government for the first time. The potential of Sinn Féin having a ministerial office in Northern Ireland government was really, really a frightening prospect for many people on the unionist side. And I am particularly struck still by an interaction that we had when we had a town hall meeting, and I can remember one woman saying to me, "Are you telling me that this is worth all the pain that I felt because I've lost loved ones?" And you just have to make it's a leap of faith, but you have to believe in the agreement. You have to believe that there is no alternative than to what is on the table. And that's what we had to go with. And you also have to say, I can't guarantee it, but I believe that this agreement is the best deal we're going to get, and we can try and make more of it afterwards. So it was a really emotional time for people. People took big risks in their personal lives. We had to sell this as a significant reduction in violence. And the notion also of amnesty was also a really difficult issue for people. People would ask in the debates, and we never called it amnesty. It was never called amnesty in our agreement, but it was called, it was a review of prisoner sentences. But in effect, and as it turned out to be, it was amnesty. So I feel it's better to be honest and call these things out as they are in the first instance. But yes, you have to say to people, and it's tough, yes, this means an amnesty for some people, but the greater good, the collective good, where we're going to, and the goal, yes, that makes it worth it. So these were things which were very, very difficult, and particularly for us, no one at the time, or really since, said sorry. We've had the provisions that we have in our agreement for reconciliation and dealing with the past. They weren't dealt with properly, and those are the issues that continue to dog us today. And all during the implementation of the last 20 years, these issues have continued to dog us, to present obstacles to really moving forward, to transforming our polity into something more. So it was difficult. It was 20 years ago, and I still remember very, very clearly how difficult it was to speak to people.
Kate, when you now say like it's 20 years, and apparently the Yes campaign made it, and the agreement was ratified and implemented. So the people who were like against and were the ones you tried to convince that this is the best deal, what do they think today?
I can't speak for them. I haven't spoken to them in a while, but I can say a little bit about political parties who were against at the time. Were actually the political parties. They were. What happened to us, I'm not saying this is going to happen in Colombia, but what happened to us is that the parties on the extremes, let's say left-right, unionist nationalist side, it was the big centrist parties. We brought everybody into the fold, in behind the agreement. The Democratic Unionist Party was extremely against, and because the centrist parties had taken risks, the Democratic Unionist Party, the DUP, chipped away at the moderate Unionist Party. Sinn Féin chipped away at the moderate Nationalist Party. And now you have a situation where the DUP, who are really against the agreement, they've been in the government for many years now in Northern Ireland. It's a problem with our agreement.
And
but
what about the promise of the reduction in violence?
I mean, that absolutely has happened. There is no question about that, and that is a real result for us. Clearly, the scale of violent conflict in our context is nowhere near the scale in Colombia. But for us, it's not just the absence of violence; it's absence of the threat of violence. So when you're living in a country, like there's a generation two generations now, depending. I don't know if the definition is still 25 years or 10 years, but there's a generation who don't know what it was like to go to school with army checkpoints, to have helicopters flying all the time, to live in a heavy militarized society, to live in areas where police never came except with a military escort. So from that perspective, it's fantastic, and the opportunities that we have taken from that have been really, really great. And maybe on the day that we actually got the referendum, the turnout was 81%, so it was very high. It was a huge degree of public legitimacy, and it was a 71% yes vote. The vast majority of that, we think, is around 95% of the Catholic vote and about 54% of Protestant vote. And that so the people who were speaking to me in town hall meetings and saying, I don't know, can I take the risk? They voted yes, but they did so reluctantly because they didn't know. But in terms of reduction of violence and absence of conflict, yes, absolutely worked. In terms of quality of government, I think there are some issues, but show me a perfect democracy. I mean, it doesn't happen. So, but what I would say is, after a referendum campaign, I think it's important to front load some deliverables so people start to see the fruits of what if they've taken a risk, that they start to see the fruits of it right away. And for us, it was the first time that antagonists work with each other during the election, during the referendum campaign. So that was for 42 days, people worked together to bring about something collective, but previously they had been enemies. So you don't solve that in 42 days. So it takes time afterwards. So setting expectations is very important. Public expectations is very important after this. And there will be setbacks. There were lots of setbacks for us. The whole question of decommissioning of arms, of IRA and loyalist weapons was a huge issue after the fact, after the assembly had been established. Sinn Féin were in government. The no loyalist communities were represented in government, but so basically Sinn Féin was the terrorists in government, as many people on the unionist side certainly saw. And it actually, the issue of decommissioning brought down our government because there was a deadline set in 2000, which was 2 years after the agreement was passed for IRA weapons to be decommissioned. That dragged on. In 2001, it led to the resignation of the then First Minister, and that brought the process down. It put the process into suspension for a year more. But then it picks up again. And I think I would just finish on the fact that if you have a public referendum and if you can have a significant public endorsement, that draws you back in, because people will walk away from the table, but when they walk back, they're walking back to that building block, to that base, and the base is going to be that referendum, that agreement, because not only is that what you as political actors, political elites have negotiated, that is what the people have endorsed, and the endurance of that legitimacy and that legacy is the tramline. It forms the contours of the political landscape that comes afterwards. But there will be setbacks. You go 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. But the touchstone is always the agreement that is done, the agreement that was inclusive, there were people participated in, and that has the legitimate endorsement of the people.
Thank you, Kate. So I think what is also important, what we get from that also for Colombia in a similar situation where the campaign is very short, and also that we see also the terrorist, and that this is of course an issue as well, like what happens with the FARC in the next stage, and the political participation that is certainly not agreed by everybody, and also, as you said, that the acceptance that people have grievances as victims, as in the political process, and would like to address them, and rightly so. But also still, what I found really interesting in what you were saying is at the end, that the referendum is not just an acceptance, yes, no, to this peace deal, but it becomes a reference. It becomes a constant reference for the process to come, where people can really see this has been an agreed process by everybody. And I think that is the main point, that if the highest form of people participating in a peace deal is basically a plebiscite, because everybody can participate that's over 18, everybody can really say yes or no. And this means also everybody owns this process afterwards. And this is something you can always go back to. So if that basically goes wrong, in that sense that it's a no, we would like to hear from you, Professor Ahmed Susan. You have been seeing this issue from different perspectives, because you have been both a member of one of the delegations, and you have been a peace activist at the same time, and you also are an academic who sees this, and I know that your institute also does a lot of polling and brings evidence into the debate. So how was that? If you heard now the experience from Northern Ireland, so what happened in Cyprus, that sort of the Yes campaign could not convince on all sides, basically everybody.
Thank you very much, Tanya. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers, IPTI and the Colombian Mission to UN here, for inviting me here. I hope that my presentation on Cyprus, even if there is slightest contribution to the plebiscite in Colombia, I would be really very happy. I will start with a very short background information on the Cyprus issue, and then I'll talk about the campaign on both sides of the UN divide in Cyprus, as well as the consequences of the votes on the 2 referendums, or the referenda in Cyprus. Well, the Cyprus conflict has first came to the UN agenda in the mid-50s, when it was clear that the British colony would end, what's going to happen in Cyprus. So it came as a debate on self-determination of Cyprus, or rather, the two communities living in Cyprus, the Greek Cypriots and the Turkish Cypriots. In 1960, Cyprus got independence, or as some call it, semi-independence from UK. A Republic of Cyprus was established by international treaties. There were three guarantors of this Republic of Cyprus, UK as the former colonial master, Turkey and Greece, also known as the motherlands of the respective communities. Some call this 1960 Republic of Cyprus a functional federation. Some called it a consociational democracy, whereas the functions of the state were shared or divided between the two communities. However, for various different reasons, I'm not going to get into that. In 1963, we had a constitutional crisis and the eruption of ethnic violence in Cyprus. In 1974, UN peacekeeping force came to Cyprus, stationed in Cyprus, and they are still in Cyprus, so it is one of the oldest missions of the UN there. In 1974, another important year, there was a Greek coup and a subsequent Turkish military operation. The island got divided into two parts, north and south. And since then, the two sides have been trying to unify the country, to solve the Cyprus problem, based on a federal state that will be bi-communal with regard to the constitutional aspects, and it will be bizonal with regard to the territorial aspects. After long years of what we call intercommunal negotiations, meaning negotiations between the two communities, by the way, it started the year I was born, back in 1968 in Beirut, and then the negotiations were transferred to Nicosia. The idea was to come up with a mutually agreed solution between the two communities. One of the latest important turning point was back in 2004, when the two sides managed, with the help of United Nations, at the end the UN played the role of filling up the remaining gaps between the two sides. Here in Bürgenstock, in Switzerland, the two sides agreed on a comprehensive solution with the help of the UN, and that solution was put to simultaneous separate referenda in Cyprus in 2004, exactly about 1 month after it was finalized here in Bürgenstock. But it was the fifth version of the plan, because the previous versions of the plan came out about a year and a half before. So people had the chance to read different versions of the plan. Now, in 2004, in the campaign, while the plan was supported by 2/3 of the Turkish Cypriots, who exactly voted 65% yes to the plan, it was rejected by a 3/4 majority by the Greek Cypriot side. Exactly 76% said no to the plan.
So Ahmed, just to understand this from for the non-Cyprus experts, that means we are talking actually about two different sort of referendums in the two sides, plus two different yes and no campaigns.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm going to come into that. There was separate simultaneous referenda taking place at the same time, one in the northern part of Cyprus and the one in the southern part of Cyprus, for Turkish Cypriots and Greek Cypriots. During the campaign, of course, each community on both sides of the UN divide was further divided by these yes and no camps. There was a very strong and widespread no camp, and a weak yes camp in the Greek Cypriot community, simply because majority of the main parties were supporting the no vote. Only one party, major party called DC, which is a liberal conservative party, partly supported it, although it openly supported it, but some of its followers did not vote yes in the referendum. That's why they had 24%, because DC is a party that has 1/3 of the vote in the Greek Cypriot side. The leader of the Greek Cypriots, the President Tassos Papadopoulos himself, was an adamant supporter of no. In the Turkish Cypriot community, there was a strong no, but at the same time, a very strong yes campaign. Most of the left-wing parties in the Turkish Cypriot community supported the yes camp, supported the solution, while the right-wing parties were voted against it. And this campaign, the no side, was also headed by the strong then Turkish Cypriot leader, Mr. Rauf Denktaş. So there was symmetry there. Both leaders at that time were against the plan. But I have to make a point here. There is a very significant difference in terms of the political structure of the Greek Cypriots and the Turkish Cypriots on the island. In the Greek Cypriot community, the political space is occupied predominantly by the political parties. So we do not have a significant civil society independent from the political parties. Even the unions are pretty much linked to the political parties. Whereas in the northern part of Cyprus, in the Turkish Cypriot community, there is a very strong and a vibrant civil society independent from the political parties. For example, the teachers' union, both elementary school and secondary school teacher unions, and they are in thousands, very strong. They are completely independent from political parties, and they formed some of the most active members of the Yes campaign. In fact, in early 2000s, there was a movement in the Turkish Cypriot community called "This Country is Ours," which was formed by several dozen NGOs and political parties who were claiming that we have to rule our land independent from being dominated by the Greek Cypriot neighbors, as well as independent from being influenced by Turkey, the motherland. So there was this very active platform for that. When you look at the demographics, in terms of the demographics of the voters, among the 65% of the Turkish Cypriots who voted yes, 80+% of them were young people. That means below 45 years old. So there was a very strong support by the new generation in the Turkish Cypriots. Whereas the picture was completely the opposite in the Greek Cypriot community. Among the 24% who voted yes were basically the old generation who had the experience of living together with the Turkish Cypriots. Whereas the majority of the young people among the Greek Cypriots voted no. Now, it is also revealed in our island-wide public opinion polls that I have been conducting with my Greek Cypriot research fellows since 2008-2009, that in the Turkish Cypriot society, the more educated people are, the more likely they are to vote yes. The picture is just the opposite on the Greek Cypriot side. The more time people spend in schools, the more likely they are going to vote no to a peace plan. I think this tells a lot about the nature of the education that people have to go through. During the campaign, the whole thing in both Greek and Turkish Cypriot leadership by Mr. Tassos Papadopoulos and Mr. Denktaş were presented to the public in a give and take way, meaning that whatever we are going to get is whatever they are going to lose, or whatever they are going to lose is whatever we are going to get. So it's a very classical sort of Cold War competitive mentality, whereas in the yes camp, both in the Turkish and Greek Cypriot society, the peace plan, which was called the Annan plan at that time, taking its name from Kofi Annan, was presented to people as a win-win situation, a case where both sides wins. The no camp on both sides tried to appeal to the fears of people and focusing mostly on the past and presenting the past as problematic, dysfunctional, full of constitutional crisis and violence and whatnot. Whereas in the yes camp on both sides, the campaigners tried to appeal to the hopes of people, and it was more future-oriented. That they were saying, okay, past, we're not denying it. We have to learn from our mistakes in the past, but we have to look forward to the future. But of course, what was missing that we now debate nowadays in the negotiations is this joint communication strategy between the two sides to have a joint campaign. This never took place. All right? In fact, the leaders themselves who negotiated later became the champions of their no campaign. When we look at the consequences, we need to understand that the referenda in Cyprus were not for democratic principles. The referenda in Cyprus was designed by the United Nations in order to bypass the then Turkish Cypriot leader Rauf Denktaş, because the UN had that belief at that time that he was the only obstacle in front of the plan, and that the Turkish Cypriots were more progressive than their leader, and the only way to bypass him was to install a referendum into the process. In fact, it was proved at the end that he was not the only one, that the Greek Cypriot leader was also very adamant against the plan. But what happened was, separate simultaneous referenda, the principle of that remained as we speak today, that it is now a principle that when the two leaders who are negotiating will come up with a plan, it will be put to simultaneous separate referenda, meaning that the Greek and the Turkish Cypriots have to approve it at the same time. The referenda in 2004, in my opinion, meant separate exercise of right of self-determination. Not in the classical sense of right to statehood, but in a more modern sense, the right to participate into the governance of the future common state by each respective community. So what were the consequences of the voting in the referenda in Cyprus? For some people, the Annan plan, which was this 182-something pages long plan, its weakness was that it failed to indicate the consequences of the three scenarios of the four possible scenarios of the referendum. What are the possible scenarios? This four? Yes, 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 no, no, yes, and no, no, right? So we know that if there is yes, yes, what would happen? Well, there would have been the establishment of a federal Cyprus, which would be a European Union member.
So, but this didn't happen. So basically,
But what about the cases of
Yes.
yes, no,
but
no,
what
yes,
was
and
the,
no, no?
So what was the consequence of the situation that was there for
Well, the
Cyprus?
plan itself stated it in it. It says that if the plan was not approved by both sides, meaning if we don't get a yes, yes, the plan would be null and void. Null and void. That's what the plan says. And I was always wondering, what does that mean? And it always comes to my mind. I liken this to, remember this, there is this movie called Mission Impossible? When Tom Cruise, the agent, first receives the message, and it says, once the message is done, it's going to self-destruct. Well, the plan destructed itself, was what happened. But of course, there are political consequences, all right? So what happened was the Turkish Cypriots got more sympathy in the international world at the beginning. The Greek Cypriots lost some credit, but then they restored it back and da-da-da-da. Okay, fine. But you know what happened? Since then, we lost 12 years plus and counting. So, you know, usually what happens is that you lost a lot of time, and you know what? The status quo. You think that it remains, but it does not. Now, for example, there are new buildings on the disputed property, changing demographics of the islands, and things of that sort, which I liken this to, you know, the snowball, when it is falling from the top of the mountain, it gets bigger and bigger. So by the time that the Cyprus problem remains unresolved, there are new layers of problems and clashes added to the Cyprus problem, so it becomes much bigger. And solving it today, tomorrow, or years later will be much more difficult. So
Thank you.
the moral of the story, you lost a lot of time.
And I think the difference maybe is between Cyprus and Colombia, that Colombia doesn't have the luxury of a permanent peacekeeping mission that sits there and protects everybody. And so the consequences might be different. So what do you think, Professor Oprimny, what the consequences would be, and what you learn for Colombia from these different experiences?
Thank you. Good afternoon, good evening for everyone. And first I want to thank the organizers, the Graduate Institute and the Mission of Colombia in Geneva for this invitation. Of course, it's not, I'm a scholar, but it's not easy to speak about this subject as a scholar because we signed the peace yesterday and we are going to have the plebiscite on on Sunday. So I'm speaking in a very complex situation. So I will try to be scholarly, but I'm now in the activist mood. As long as I leave that, I'm going to go to my apartment to make an article and to send 20 tweets about a yes vote. And I will say if the no wins, we are going to lose at least 12 years. That's the Cyprus learning, isn't it? And you will support me. Let me put it first. This first discussion, making peace with the FARC has been very, very difficult. The story is not that we are having war with the FARC for 52 years. The story is that we are having peace with the FARC for 30 years, and we haven't achieved peace. So a lot of people said, but you Colombians are really stupid. Knowing that making a peace deal with the FARC is very difficult, now you put it on referendum. So I think that the first question is, was that a smart move or a bad move? I always said that it was the smartest move of the president, one of the smartest moves of President Santos. So I like to defend the idea why it was rational and even on normative grounds, on empirical and normative grounds, it was a good choice to say we are going to have at the end of the day something like a plebiscite, a referendum, a consultation, ratification. We made a lot of legal discussion in Colombia of that, but I'm not going to turn into those legal discussions. And why was it, and we have these experiences. Cyprus I learned later, but the two good and bad experiences in Colombia was Northern Ireland and in a sense South Africa as good experience of referendums, kinds of popular ratification. And the bad, not worse, but the bad experience was Guatemala. It was more near than us. Later on we will learn about you. Sorry, it was not at the beginning. But why was it necessary in Colombia? First, because we were getting out from 8 years of over war with the FARC, in which the idea was the military solution. And the FARC in Colombia were very, very unpopular. It's not like the IRA, that was very unpopular on one side, but very popular on the other. No, the FARC was unpopular all over the Colombian political sphere. So if you are getting out from that and you want to make a peace in Colombia, you knew from the beginning, or President Santos, I imagine, knew from the beginning that there was going to be a strong opposition at one moment from the right wing and from former President Uribe. That was easy to try to see that was going to happen. So in that sense, President Santos make always, and the main argument was going to be, there's going to be some kind of conspiracy between the government and the FARC to impose on Colombian society something very, very bad. So always President Santos said, okay, yes, we are negotiating in a secret, not in a secret, but not in a public way in Havana. But at the end of the day, you citizens are going to decide, and that I think make the negotiation possible. Without this promise by President Santos, the FARC didn't realize at the beginning when they signed the framework agreement, when they signed one word that said referendación, which I don't know if it has a translation in English, but something like referendation. Nobody knew exactly what did it mean. I think in the government side they knew that there was going to be a popular vote, but the FARC were not so clear. They wanted something like a constituent assembly, something quite different, that the results were going to be a constituent assembly. But for the government, it was a smart move. The second reason why I think it was, even it is risky, it was a smart move is because with a divided society in relation to war and a divided elite, it was the first time that the Colombian elite was divided in things of war and peace. In the past peace processes, they were somewhat united. Okay, we're going to make peace with the M19, which was a smaller guerrilla in the 90s, or we are going to make war. Now they were split. So with a divided elite, with a divided Colombian society, if you didn't have something as a popular pronouncement, then the implementation would be very, very difficult. I think this was the second argument. The third argument is a more legalistic one, but we Colombians are very, very legalistic. You don't know a society as legalistic as we are. Even the armed groups are the more legalistic. The FARC, they want everything to put in legal forms. If you put it in the Constitution, then it's all right. And I say to them, I'm a lawyer. I know that Constitution are not fulfilled. No, you have to put it in the Constitution. Okay, we are very legalistic. So in a legalistic society in which you have very strong judicial power, you have a very strong constitutional court, then you need something like popular legitimacy to open, to provide flexibility for the implementation. If you don't have a popular ratification, then to establish a mechanism to implement the peace deal in a fast way wouldn't be possible. And then if you have the implementation in the traditional procedures of the Colombian constitution, then it would take 10 years to implement the peace deal. So the government knew we need something that will open something like a space, a legal space to implement. And that also is very, very important. And the fourth was to put pressure on the FARC. Because if the FARC knew that at one moment the peace deal will be submitted to the citizenry, then they will have to find reasonable solution. I remember having a discussion about because that's very interesting. The same issues, the same divisive issues that you have in Northern Ireland are the ones in Colombia. Political participation for the FARC and the issue of justice. And we were discussing, I was discussing with a lawyer of the FARC and saying about if we don't achieve a solution about justice, then you will have the ICC. And he says, I don't mind the ICC. The ICC is not going to intervene in Colombia. My problem is the referendum. I know that we have to find a solution, because if we don't find a solution, then Colombian citizenry is not going to approve it. And I think that he was absolutely right. So for all those reasons, I think it was a good move. What are the risks? And now I'm optimistic. We have a poll this morning, and we continue winning, but more than 20 points. Let's see. And I think we are going to win, but we have to win with a wide margin, like in Northern Ireland. We use the example of Northern Ireland. If you have legitimacy, even with a divided society, then, and with a lot of problems, then implementation is going to be possible. And we use this notion of the EUP, the Reverend Pasley, who was, we said, this is the Uribe from Colombia. He was against the referendum, the peace deal. And now he is in government with the Sinn Féin. You can imagine it's something like the FARC and Uribe in a coalition government. I say I wouldn't like it at all, but it shows that if you have a democratic energy, it's going to work. So what are the difficulties that we have to face? First, there are divisive issues that I think are natural in all peace processes. The issue of justice, the issue of victims that don't want this kind of peace, the issue of some reforms that are not accepted, the issue of becoming former terrorists or so-called terrorists becoming political actors. That, I think, is going to be divisive in all peace processes. What are the ones that I think are very specific to Colombia and different from those cases? First, the popular vote is going to be in the cities, and the war has been a rural war. So you don't have this notion like in Northern Ireland, okay, it's my benefit to finish violence, because in Bogota, the armed conflict has finished, I don't know, 10 years ago. Where the no might win in Bogota, according to the last poll. Maybe it's going to win in Bogota. So that's a very difficult issue, that a citizen vote is going to decide about a rural war. And that makes that you have to invent new arguments. The argument of self-interest in Colombia is not as useful as in other countries. So many of us have been trying to use a more ethical argument, a more moral argument. Okay, you have to decide, taking into account the peasants who are going to suffer the war, not yourself. But that's not always very compelling. But I think in Colombia it's necessary. The second difficulty, you have a very popular no man and a very unpopular president. And that's tricky, because everyone says, no, but I'm not going to vote yes, the referendum, because Santos, I don't like him. I don't like him either, but it's not the issue. The issue is peace or war. It's not that issue. But that has been very difficult, but the results are showing that the campaign to delink both things has been working, because in the last poll, ex-President Uribe is still the most popular politician in Colombia, and President Santos is not at all popular. But even in spite of that, the yes is winning and the no is, it seems that we are going to win the decision. What could be the consequences? It's very difficult. It's very difficult to say. What I have been saying, but I think I'm in the activist mood, is that the yes make implementation of peace quite probable. And I took the example of Northern Ireland and South Africa. And the no is going to make the return of war very probable, because we don't have the issue of Cyprus, a divided country. So what's going to happen? The FARC said what has been the main point of the no campaign, in which they have been quite clever. The main point of the no campaign is they are not anymore against a peace agreement. At the beginning, they were against because we don't speak to terrorists. But now they say, no, we are in favor of a peace agreement, but a good peace agreement, not this one. So if you vote no, then you are voting yes, but for a better agreement. And so the campaign in the yes side has been no is no. It has been very sophisticated in Colombia. No, yes is yes, no is no. And I think we are now in that situation.
Yeah, I think.
Thank you.
I think what I have heard a lot in the last couple of weeks, that a lot of people get a lot of hope and say, definitely it's going to be yes. I remember when I was first talking to the government like 1.5 years ago about the possibility of a plebiscite, and they were like, yes, and had all the arguments like you had. I would say, like, but do you know that you can also have a no vote? And they were like, yes, but there are really cases of no votes? So I think it was also, and I think also this problem, what you mentioned, the big deal in Colombia, that the peace process is so politicized, that we don't talk about peace or war, yes or no, but do I like this person or that person, and this politics and that politics. And I think this is the biggest problem in my view if I compare it to other cases. And I think there's also one tricky issue I want to give you on your way to reflections for the next couple of days. There had been many countries where we had polls, public opinion polls, shortly before the referendum. In Switzerland, actually, a lot. And what happens in Switzerland, that's very interesting, very often we have, because we are a democracy where we like to vote every now and then in Switzerland, as you know. And so that means often when you as a citizen are confronted with a poll that says like Sunday's referendum is almost won, then you think, oh, if the weather is nice, I don't go, because it's almost won. And in Switzerland, we lost a lot of very important referendums to the no campaigns, where nobody in Switzerland was kind of really in favor of the no, but people didn't show up for elections because they thought it's already won, so I don't even have to go. So there's also a tricky issue with this public opinion polls that we sometimes cannot like take them as for granted. So I think this is a thing you still, I think, have to...
The reason is that we Colombians are serious people. we don't... Colombia, that wouldn't happen. Yes. You don't go to vote because it's raining. No.
Yeah.
We are very hard-working citizens.
So I'm already relieved. I'm really relieved about that one.
No, we know that, and we are making a strong campaign that this is the most crucial decision you are going to have in over 20 years. You have to go. And so people, and the second is, it's not enough to win. We have to win by, as we said in soccer, in football. I don't know how to say that in English. By goleada, but how do you say?
Yeah, by
5-0.
Yeah.
Yes, because if we don't do it, we are in trouble.
Yes, and it's true, because if it will be like just a slight margin, it could be always used as an argument. It's not the real one, because it was just... But let me open to the audience, and let's see what questions people have, and then we can sum up. So I'm starting with the lady here.
Hi, thank you for this conference. My name is Stephanie. I'm a graduate student here at the Institute. My question is, and it was mentioned by Ms. Firang on the importance of showing early peace dividends. It was also one of the messages of Ban Ki-moon's speech yesterday. My question is how to avoid, but at the same time, things will get difficult and will get complex, whatever happens after Sunday for the implementation of the agreements. So how to avoid the complexity of the situation that's coming to be against this necessity of showing peace dividends? Well, at first, it's probably not going to be very visible. And what are the potential dividends that could be exploited at first? Thank you.
Thank you. I have the gentleman over there. Where's the microphones? Yes, here, over there, the last row.
Hi, my name is Javier Jaramillo, and I have a small comment and then a question for Mr. Uprimi. The comment is that being a former student of the Graduate Institute, I would have loved to see to be able to listen for the possible consequences of a yes or a no from both positions, because as we know and you've made very clear, like you support the yes. And this is an academic forum also, so to see the no position would be very interesting for future occasions. And my question is, you mentioned that we need, to get legitimacy, we need a percentage that is very high for the plebiscite or the referendum to win. But still the threshold, with such a small threshold, do you think that even if it wins, that legitimacy would be obtained? Because a 13% threshold is not very high. I would like to know your inputs about it. Thank you.
Thank you. I have the lady here, and then I make a turn in this direction.
Buenas tardes. Mi pregunta va un poco en la experiencia de Irlanda del Norte, en el sentido de que después de la firma y del acuerdo, el partido que está en el poder desde entonces es el partido que estaba en contra del plebiscito. En Colombia, como se ha mencionado bastante, el problema es bastante politizado. Mi pregunta es, ¿qué se espera en términos políticos después de esta firma y qué consecuencias tendría en términos de la implementación del proceso?
Yeah, so
she was asking that, taking into account the Northern Ireland experience, that at the end of the day, those who were against the peace, the Jan Pasley movement that was against the peace process ended in the government, what would be the likely consequences of the plebiscite in terms of political dynamics in Colombia?
Mm-hmm. So we have the gentleman here, and then the lady here, and then the gentleman here.
Yes. First of all, thank you very much for all three of you, from Northern Ireland, Cyprus to Colombia. I suppose everything you need to know about peace process you've heard today. But my question is more directly...
Can you say who you are?
My name is Amadou John. I am a lawyer. My question is more directed towards Professor Rodriguez. It is always good to have an agreement, but as we know, the devil is always in the detail, particularly in explaining it to people and getting it accepted. What I would like to know as a constitutional matter, are there any constitutional safeguards to this agreement? I ask that because certainly in the Anglo-Saxon world, one parliament cannot bind another parliament. So, for example, if in the unlikely situation that the no camp come to power, is there a possibility of repealing the agreement? And if so, what would it mean? Is it back to square one? And finally, just to echo the question about Santos' decision to just limit the threshold to 13.13%. I think Colombia has a population of at least 40 million. Touching on that, I know he's very clever in actually sort of putting it to vote, but what was the wisdom about the 13%? Thanks, bye-bye.
And the lady here.
Well, hello, my name is Laura. I'm from Colombia, and I'm also in my mood, activist mood. So my question, as you know, FARC is not the only armed group that we have, and I really want to know what you think about the consequence that we might have in regard to the peace initiatives that we have been holding with the ELN armed group. And my second question is also, what if we have a yes on Sunday? What are the challenges of implementation of our agreement? Because yes is the first step, but what comes next? So, thank you.
Thank you. I can have one more. Yeah, please.
Hi, my name is Alejandro Manga. I'm not studying here, I'm studying at the University of Geneva, but my girlfriend's studying here, so here I am.
It's fine. You're allowed to be here, don't worry.
Thank you very much. So yeah, my questions are in general. We were talking yesterday with Rodrigo at the parade we had, and the thing is, I think one thing, and I want to ask to all of you, is that the playing field is not leveled, and I think that's a constant in referenda all over the world. So from your experience, do you think it is better to have a playing field that is leveled when it comes to the legitimacy of the accords? And the second one, which is actually also like I'm starting to think about with my experience here in Geneva, I got here 2 weeks ago, is that I see all over the place these ads from Mouvement Citoyen Genevois, and it's like populism, right-wing populism, and it's really, like when you see the ads, you can see it's playing with the fear. The same thing that happened with Brexit, with like the buzz they had about the NHS, and the same thing that is actually happening in Colombia with social media and right-wing groups sending messages about how we're going to pay them a salary while people are dying and have no money. Like basically they play on fear on people, and the results can be terrifying. It's like, what could happen in Colombia if we lose the referendum? What's going to happen in Britain with all this thing about Brexit, and what happens here in Geneva when, like, just for stupid things like parking lots for people that live across the borders. So populism and referenda and legitimacy of accords, given how the playing field is used by the persons that actually ask the questions.
Yes, thank you. So I suggest we start with you, and maybe you can put on first your lawyer head and give us the more info and answer the questions about the more sort of legal issues and the agreement, and then sort of move on to the other questions like the yes, no, the consequences that was asked, and then we move on and cover the rest of the questions.
Okay, thank you for the questions. First, about the issue of the threshold of 13%. It's a complex issue. I was the one who defended it, so I'm going to defend it again. The problem was the following one. In Colombia, we had what we call a participation quorum for referendums. That is a referendum, according to the Constitution, to be approved. Not only the yes would have to win against the no, which is obvious, but the participation should be higher than 25%, which is very low for European standards, but it's not quite low for Colombian standards. We have a tradition of very high abstention, very low turnout. So what's the problem with this kind of mechanism, that a participation quorum paradoxically incites non-participation? Because when you see that the yes or no are very similar, one way to avoid that the yes wins is not to vote, to go to abstention, and then maybe the yes will win, but will not arrive to 25%. So that was the situation. So what some of us propose is, if you have this situation, then to have this kind of participation quorum is a design mistake of democracy. And that's more or less, I think, common sense in those who have studied that. Participation quorum are bad because they can stimulate non-participation. And an example is Italy. In Italy, when you have elections, participation is about 90%. When you have referendums, it's much lower because Italy have a participation quorum. So you can change it not by a participation quorum, but by an approval quorum. That is, the quorum of citizen voting is going to be counting only by the yes votes. That is, and that was the rule that was approved for this plebiscite, that if the plebiscite will be approved, if the yes wins, but if the yes goes beyond a certain percentage of the electorate. And we say this is a better mechanism because you don't stimulate non-participation. Everyone has to reveal its preferences. Say, I'm against or I'm in favor, and not, no, as I'm against, I stay at home. No, if you are against, you have to say it. And if you are in favor, you have to say it. And if you don't want to say anything, stay at home. But if you don't stay at home and say, I am against, we are not going to give disadvantage of those who are against the peace process. So we say, okay, it's a democracy issue, so we are going to change a participation quorum by an approval quorum. But what would be the number? And we say, okay, the Constitution to be reformed requires 25% of a participation quorum. If we don't want people to abstain, then if 13% vote yes, how much would you need for a no to win? You would need at least 13% plus 1. And 13% plus 13%, even lawyers, we can do this math, it makes 26. So we say 13% is as much stronger as the 25% quorum of participation established in the Constitution for its reform. And we say, let's take it. So people said, but that's not enough legitimacy. And we are saying, of course, we are not going to vote only 13%. It's the minimal vote required. But of course, we hope that we are going to vote 50, 60%, but it's the minimal requirement. If we stay at only 20%, we are in troubles. Of course, I think we need a much stronger popular participation. So it's not that we want to win only by 13%. It's the minimal requirement for the decision to be legally binding.
I mean, as a non-lawyer and working on peace process, I think it was a very clever move to have that as basically... So as basically also a safeguard of the process. So moving to the other question in terms of safeguards, the constitutional safeguards, because as a non-lawyer, I can tell you, whatever the safeguard is, it kind of doesn't matter. Because if you have a no vote, you can never put the same agreement back to people. It's the end politically, and it doesn't matter if you have constitutional safeguards, but if there are any.
No, I agree totally. I say the more important safeguard, I'm a lawyer, but I say the more important safeguard is a political one. If you build political legitimacy, it's going to be like in Ireland, Northern Ireland. But of course, for the FARC leaders, it was not enough. And they put 20 safeguards. I can describe very, very shortly. They said the agreement is a special agreement on the international humanitarian law. They went here to put it and to say in order to that to be internationally binding. I defended this idea. It's a complex idea, but it was to provide some kind of international binding force to the peace agreement. The second is that the peace agreement would go into the constitution by a mechanism. After the popular vote, if the popular wins, then the Congress can put into the constitution the whole agreement in order to be implemented. It's a complex discussion in Colombia. I would say it's part of the bloc de constitutionnalité, the French notion. But these are all legal safeguards. But I think that the more important safeguard is the political one.
I think just to add on this one, I think the most important thing is for these safeguards, and I think it's good to have these safeguards, and it's not for a no vote, it's for a yes vote.
Except for a yes
because when the process, I think the idea was also that the process cannot be challenged in a year or 2 or 3, that you can just say, okay, let's have another referendum, and if that's lost, then everything is nullified in 3 years. So I think the safeguards are protection stream for the future rather than for now.
And I said, no, you're absolutely right, because people who were in favor of the peace process said, but can we have some legal safeguard for the no vote? And I say, I don't think so. It's serious matter. The yes win, we can implement it. The no win, we cannot implement it.
Can a future government undo what is already been approved?
Yeah, that's the whole point. So he asked whether future government can undo it. That's why you have these safeguards. It's the idea of the safeguards.
Yes,
like
it would be very difficult. It would be very difficult because you will have to reform the constitution, and then you have discussion if this kind of reform without a popular vote would be admissible. So it's going to be very, very difficult.
As we're running out of time, can you just briefly comment on the question of the consequences? I understood of a no.
The consequences of the no, in legal terms, the Constitutional Court has to analyze if the plebiscite was constitutional, and the court said rightly, we are putting on vote the peace accord, not the pursuit of peace. So if the no wins, yes, the government can renegotiate a settlement. So in legal terms, in theoretical terms, a renegotiation of the peace deal is possible. What I think is that, but that's my vision, that in political terms, it's almost impossible.
12 years we heard.
Yes, the same idea. So, and as the FARC is not going to be 12 years in isolated camps, then the possibility of war returning is high.
Yeah, Kate, let me move to you on the early peace messages, and if there's anything else you would like to give, let's say, the Colombian peace process on its way from the Northern Irish experience of, if you get even a yes vote, how difficult it is to implement the peace deal. So is there anything that makes it easier?
I would just maybe briefly, firstly, address the point of turnout. For us, so many people were in favor of it, which was great, but there was also a real sense of history in the making. And Tony Blair has been roundly ridiculed for saying, I feel the hand of history on my shoulder as he announced the peace agreement. But that's what it was like. So I think if you can speak to a sense of history, people will want to be part of it and want to say, I voted in that referendum. I mean, for me, This is the only election in my life that I voted for and I come out on the winning side. So never again. So for me, you know, was I disappointed sometimes afterwards? Yes. Do I regret my vote? Never, never, not for 1 second. So in terms of, sorry, the question was
the safeguard, the early peace, the early
early deliverables.
Deliverables
Yeah.
that you can give.
They're difficult. Sometimes a deliverable is about managing an expectation and saying we're not actually going to be able to front load, and we weren't actually able to do it. But again, coming back to the idea of the referendum as being a touchstone for the future, a basis on which we were to build whenever we got into difficulties, that's what we looked back to. We were helped very much by allies, international allies, the United States, British and Irish governments in the domestic context, but also the European Union, who delivered a lot of funding to community groups and to people who had previously been involved in violence and in places which were marked by extreme poverty, and extreme poverty leading to violent activism. So the EU really understood that peace process is for the long term. You need to commit to the long term, and you need money. So this money makes a difference, and also power makes a difference. And I think this comes to the point of what do people do afterwards? Why did the DUP, why did Ian Paisley come in? Well, it's the same reason that people on the extreme edges of your polity will come in, because politics, peace, is about the distribution of power, the regulation of power, and who gets a piece of the pie. And it's that simple. And so creating an incentive for political actors to be part of that, I've very rarely, if ever, seen a politician who turns down a chance to influence their society, to be powerful in their society. And in terms, the question down here was about, it's not just FARC, as I understand it, but another armed group. I'm not familiar with the detail of your situation, but yes, number one, paramilitary terrorist groups fragment after. So we have, like, the IRA now has 2 or 3 other branches: continuity IRA, real IRA. So these are all people who say, I'm the pure fighter for the Irish Republic, etc. So there will be fragmentation, and there will be violence because of that. That was our experience. But also, you mentioned earlier, part of the reason why the IRA were successful was not because everybody on the national side supported them, but there was some tacit support. No, there was not explicit support maybe, but there was some tacit support that something needed to be done. But if you get enough people centered around a referendum result that there's consensus about, then the ground starts to shift, and the idea of those armed groups and their legitimacy starts to reduce. And so they themselves will see, you know, what is the, you know, do we, in the medium to long term, will we get anything if we continue an armed struggle? And I would suggest that their analysis will have to be that know that they've got to throw their lot in, that their best interest will also to go with the flow, as it were. So,
Thank you. So, Professor Susan, before, what is it what you would like to give Colombia on its way?
Don't lose time. Is number one. I start with an anecdote. Back in 1994, 20-something years ago, I was a very young person. I was part of this expert group of the UN who was trying to implement confidence-building measures in Cyprus. Something like opening a joint airport between the two sides, opening up a free zone between the two sides and whatnot. I saw 20-something years ago how that exercise was politicized by both sides and flushed down the toilet. And I could not help but to think that, you know, if we managed to do those things 22 years ago, we would be talking about a different Cyprus today. But look, even if we manage to establish, well, first of all, come up with a comprehensive solution, that's the beginning of a big and arduous journey, because peace comes later. It's the people who make peace. Okay, the leaders, they make the deal, but it's the people where we should start from the education system and all socialization and whatnot to establish the seeds of peace. I once wrote in one of the academic articles that if we manage to establish a federation in Cyprus, I call it Belgianization of Cyprus. And a lot of people say, oh, Professor, you got it wrong. Belgium is not a good federation model and all that. I said, don't insult my intelligence. I've been to Belgium many times and whatnot. But remember, in Belgium, several years ago, there were elections, and more than 400 days, they couldn't establish the government. And I asked the question, what happened to Belgium? I think the answer is very telling. Nothing. And I said, isn't this great? Because the alternative, what we went through in the past was, due to our differences, we killed ourselves, we killed one another, and we hurt one another. So, the extreme alternative of Belgianization is what I, again, invented the term Syrianization. And, I prefer Belgianization to Syrianization. At least we know that it's going to be a difficult-to-run federation, but nonetheless, whenever we have difficulties, we'll accept our difficulties and we'll move on. So don't lose time and start implementing as soon as possible.
Thank you. So if I would sum up what we have learned for either going for no or yes, so if I'm not mistaken, so a no vote, if you see that from the Cyprus situation, means even legally, if it's possible, you can legally restart negotiations the day after the no vote. Politically, that's absolutely not possible, and it will take many, many, many years. And I think what we have also learned from the Cyprus case is that the conflict transforms. So we cannot just go back where we were and where you know your enemies and you know what's going on, but there will be dynamics, and they might not be all good, these dynamics. So this transformation of the conflict. If there is a yes vote, I think what we have learned now, you're part of history. I think that's very exciting, isn't it? But that means also, I think in the Colombian case, that if there is a yes vote, that people have overcome the politicization of the peace process and would have voted for peace or for the opposite, but would have not voted just for a political sort of statement. And I think what I found also interesting, what you said, is that it would also be an act of solidarity for those suffering, because when you are in the cities, you're not suffering. It's the people in the rural areas who suffer since 50 years. So it's also an act of solidarity. But I think what we have also learned from Northern Ireland in this case is that there is a lot of challenges to come. And what you have also said, it's this managing of expectations, that what happens in peace agreements. It's not so much about what is really implemented, it's about what people perceive. And what we have also learned in Guatemala, you mentioned that, where the no vote came only after the peace deal was signed for the constitutional agreements, that the no campaign can also even get momentum afterwards to undermine a peace agreement and is very possible even with a yes vote. So there will be resistance, it will come up, and you will have to face this all the time as you go. And communication is very key, to be very honest to people. And I think the positive thing also in the Colombian peace agreement is the participation of citizens in the implementation of the agreement all over the country. And I think this is very important. I would like to just close, because one of the points that was not addressed on the ELN, I think it is clear that if for people in the rural areas, violence will not stop. It is a problem. And if you are killed by the FARC, by the paramilitaries, by whoever, or by the drug deal, or by the ELN, you don't care. You're still dead. That means it is really important that the process continues, and that sort of when one process is over, that now the blockage of the start of the negotiations with the ELN will be overcome, and that the government can continue the sort of peace process with the next armed group. I think that is very crucial for the Colombian case. So I wish you all a nice evening, and thank you very much for coming. And I think we wish Colombia all the best.